Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show, Linda Lindquist-Bishop, who is the head of a company called Courageous Thinking. Now, I love the name Courageous Thinking because I think that is something that we are just lacking way too much in the world. So, Linda, it's a real honor to have you.
Well, thank you, Doug. It's great to be here.
So what gave you the upper hand to name an organization Courageous Thinking?
Well, I'm passionate about adventure and competition and living our fullest life. And to do that, if we step out, we end up hitting obstacles. And to get through those obstacles, we need courage. So that all added together to this thought about courageous thinking.
Are there people who, I mean, there certainly are people who are courageous like you, and I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell a little bit of your story, but there are some people who aren't naturally courageous. Is it something that can be learned, or is it just innate?
Oh, it's absolutely something that can be learned because it's about who we are. It's about listening to our internal dialogue. It's about learning about the truth of who we are. And it's about really learning that we can make a choice of either operating from decisions that are based on love or based on fear. And those decisions actually create the world that we step into. So we want to create the world that we can be courageous in.
So tell us about the truth of who you are.
Well, the truth of who I am is I'm a jack of all trades, maybe a master of none except a few. One of those is sailing, and sailing has been a great path of adventure for me for my entire life. I was able to start in a very small boat in a little town in northern Michigan, and following that passion through a lot of obstacles has taken me all over the world and through a couple world championship victories and the Super Bowl of sailing, the America's Cup. So it's been a great, great path.
So I have to say, in preparing for this interview, Linda, I did have a chance to look at your website and to see a very cute picture of you when you were a little girl in a little sailboat. I guess it was with your father. It was quite adorable, but then you came a long way. What was the most courageous thing you ever had to do on a boat?
Oh, my. Trust my leaders. And I've never answered that question that way before, but it all comes down to it really doesn't matter the difficult situation we're in. If I don't trust my fellow teammates, if I don't trust my leaders and also trust that I know I'm going to make the right decision, you can't think about that when you're in that moment of crisis, whether all of a sudden it's blowing 50 knots or the mast comes down or somebody's overboard. That trust has to be instant. And that comes from a lot of preparation and discipline together.
Wow. And that's all about the team as well. You've also been a lead. You're saying trust your leaders, but you yourself have been the leader and you've had to command the trust of others as well. How do you go from one role to the other?
Not to be repetitive, but that knowing the truth of who we are, having the confidence that in a crisis situation, I may not have been in this situation, but I've been through others and I've chosen to learn from those other situations. Another key piece really in the whole leadership equation for me is the giving and seeking feedback. I really believe that is the number one element for performance improvement, and we pursue that in our team environments for sailing relentlessly every day. So I've learned a lot about leadership through that feedback cycle.
Yeah, I like the way you're describing it, the giving and seeking feedback, both telling people as well as getting feedback, because, my day job is that I'm a financial advisor. And so I talk to people all the time about money. And a lot of times someone comes up to me and says, hey, Doug, what stock should I buy? And I have to tell them that, that's not really a very good question because there's thousands of investments that you can get involved in, but you really have to understand who you are. And so I'm always trying to get feedback from the clients about who they are, and I think that hopefully they're coming to me to get some feedback about what's out there. It's that level of communication which, quite frankly, and I think a lot of people have trouble with. Is doing some sort of sport like sailing or the way you've discovered it a way to help people develop the skill of communication?
Well, I consider racing sailboats the greatest leadership development and team building lab that exists in the world, and for several reasons. One, we deal with a constantly changing dynamic environment, which I think translates very much to your financial world. With or without the black swans, the big, huge events that are game changers, the dynamics are just constantly changing. So within that, we have to have solid communication. Everybody has to have their levels of expertise in their own area. We have to be able to turn on a dime and interpret data, both that's happening on the boat, with the competitors around us, which are many, and all the elements. And all these things are happening simultaneously. So being able to sort through that, having been through the playbook a lot, and then we're going to make mistakes. And as one of my greatest leaders, Terry Hutchinson, has said, let's make mistakes, but let's not make the same ones twice. So we really work hard on that in our feedback sessions and debriefs every day.
That is fabulous advice. We're talking with Linda Lindquist-Bishop, who is the head of Courageous Thinking. She's also a world-renowned sailor and has been involved with many multinational corporations. She speaks around the world. She's been talking to us about the concept of being courageous. Now, I'd like to dive in a little bit more to what you teach because, Linda, frankly, a lot of times I'll talk to people about the importance as long-term investors of being able to take risk, because if a person's not able to take any risk, then he's probably not going to be able to let his portfolio grow over time. And you said in the beginning that courage is something people can learn. Now, I know on your website you talk about Mountain A and Mountain B and the Valley. What's all this about?
Well, it's about the journey of life, and we strive so hard to get to a goal, and very often we achieve it. It may be a position in work, it may be an athletic or a financial goal, but we get there. But what we find is it's fabulous when we're there, it's a great view, but then what? Oftentimes we can see there are bigger other goals we want to get to, or very often we don't know what we want to do next, but we know we can't stay up here because we got here. The challenge is there's no direct, as I say, gondola over to the next mountaintop. We have to go back down and do some work. And if we're not conscious that that's the normal success journey, that we have to take ourselves off of that high peak and be willing to go down and learn and submit and find great mentors and make mistakes in order to climb that next peak, we get despondent. We get fearful. A lot of times you'll find people trying to crawl back up to that previous mountaintop, and you can't climb up the other side because you've already been there and the game's changed. So normalizing that dip in the valley and really embracing, the unknown, but that's part of the journey to your next chapter of greatness or adventure or success is the key to your own positive internal dialogue that will propel you on that journey.
Linda, one of the first things I wanted to say as you were describing this is, of course, it sounds kind of like the stock market. There are big dips and there are hopefully some big mountains along the way. But and the fact is, it is true that most of the return of the market over the long term is not that it goes up a little bit every month. It's that a few times you have a big jump, and that's why people need to stay invested for the long term. We often use the phrase with them, it's not timing the market that makes you money, but it's time in the market that makes you money. So that would be if I was trying to agree with you. But let me just take the other side a little bit, which is for a normal person who's working and saving, putting money into a 401k or retirement plan, or just putting money in a brokerage account to try and grow his portfolio, he doesn't want to have this kind of volatility. He is looking for a slow, maybe not slow, but at least a steady approach. Is there room for both for people who are going to be successful, or are the really successful people the ones who are willing to jump into the valley in order to get up to Mountain B?
Well, the answer is both and, because it's just a degree of dynamics. One is acknowledging that there's a steady path. The other is, as you say, making the big jump. regardless of those two, neither are a steady line from the bottom left to the up and right. There are dips within those. It's just how big the dips are. Your marriage, your personal relationship, you want to increase and go up to the right, but we'll all acknowledge every day isn't a mountaintop experience. So it's dealing with whatever those dips are along the way, whether they're the small ones. We all have different appetite for risk. That's certainly true in sport. And what I know about your world, it's true in finance. So this is part of knowing the truth of who you are. You're not going to want to put yourself in that situation of jumping off the precipice into the valley to start the new thing if that's not who you are. You may want a gradual descent, or you just might want to make a little change. It depends on who we are and how we want to define success for ourselves in life.
I think it's very important. I think maybe we'll just wrap up with that concept. And I think in whatever field you are, and I'm going to bring it back to personal finance, is that when you're dealing with your own money, especially you were talking for a minute about being in a relationship, when you're with someone else in a relationship, you have to be on the same page. You have to be willing to communicate with one another and trust each other so that you can come up with together the path you want to take, whether it's going to be the more volatile path and a little more risky, or something that's a little smoother that may not get you quite as high, but at least it's a little bit more predictable. Linda, we're just about out of time, but I think there's a lot more that you have to teach people. So in the last few seconds, tell me, how can people learn more about you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Well, they can go to the Courageous Thinking website, which is cgthink.com. I have a TEDx out talk about that actual mountain A, B in the valley, mountain of courage. And with some colleagues, I've created the Rising Tide Leadership Institute, which mission is to inspire, educate, and equip young women in the world for leadership using these high-tech, high-performance platforms because they're such a great training ground and analogy for teaching people adventure, risk, and courage and success.
Super. And we will put a link to that and all of that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Linda, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. Have a great day.
You are listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.